Okay, gentlemen, let's get down to business. Now, you men have been walking past these charts every day, but I wonder how many of you have stopped to study them. Well, you better move in closer, because that's exactly what we're going to do now. You've all had banks, turns, climbs, glides, and some S's across the road. So we'll begin by reviewing the S's before going on to 8's. As you know, the S across roads is flown at 500 feet altitude. Okay, here's Wilbur Wright to fly the maneuver for us. Now, what's the first thing you do?
Look around.
You bet. And you look for certain definite things. You want a good road, a straight one. And you want to be sure that no other cadet has picked the same road as... Life can be shortened considerably by guys like Wilbur Wright. Remember, too, if your engine should suddenly conk out, be sure that you pick a better spot than this to set your ship down. Yes, Bossy, that's the way the Air Corps feels about guys like Wilbur Wrong. So let's watch Wilbur Wright do it the right way, okay? Okay. You come into the road at right angles, straight and level. You're watching your revs and altitude. You cross the road and roll into a turn, starting a full half circle that brings you back to the road, and you're again on straight and level. Crossing the road, you start into a turn the opposite way. Keep the same medium bank through the half circle on this side of the road. This pattern, which is nothing but well-drawn half circles on each side of the road, completes one S turn. Are there any questions? Good. Then let's get on with the next step. It's only a little bit more difficult. It's the first of the elementary 8's, known as the 8 along the road. You fly along the road to a definite starting point. You make your turn using a medium bank and fly a full 360-degree circle on one side, returning to the road exactly where you left it. You hold straight flight down the road a bit before turning the opposite way. Again, you use the same medium bank, making a full circle on the other side of the road and returning to your point of departure. This completes the ground pattern of one elementary 8. You'll note that they're really not true figure 8s, but merely a series of alternate circles. But let's get back and see what happens to Wilbur Wrong flying the same pattern in a strong crosswind. Notice the wind is at right angles to the road. Here he makes his turn and holds his same medium bank throughout. Notice how the moving belt of air carries him back to the road, shortening the first half of his circle and stretching the length of his turn in the last half. He winds up across the road below his mark. Hold it, Wilbur. Now look where you've ended up. And over here is where you should be. Now look at the amount of drift. Quite a bit, isn't it? Well, let's try the downwind leg. You can see what happens when you hold the same medium bank. Your circle is stretched in the first half, and you're carried too far from the road. In the upwind half, the circle is greatly shortened, and you land far short of your point on the road. The only way to make a correct pattern is by constantly varying your bank to prepare for drift. Here's Wilbur Wright to do just that. He comes crabbing down the road at 500 feet, pointing his nose slightly into the wind. He starts his turn with a moderately steep bank into the wind, decreasing his bank as he heads directly upwind. Then as he goes crosswind, notice the bank is at its shallowest point. But on the downwind turn, Wilbur Wright gradually goes into a steep bank and levels out as he hits the road. Now Wilbur crabs along, ready for his downwind circle. He makes his turn with the wind, rolling into a steep bank. Then shallow on the crosswind. On the upwind turn, Wilbur again goes into a steep bank, but shallows out to level flight upon completing his circle over the road. One point to remember is that you don't change from one bank to the next and rigidly hold each one. If you did, your circles would have corners on them, like this. Get it?
Right, sir.
Good. Then let's move along to the next chart and have a whack at crossroad 8s. These crossroad 8s are usually flown at about 500 feet, and you really get a figure 8 out of them. This is an ideal crossroad. So if one of our pilots will come over here, we'll get on with crossroad 8. What's the first thing you do? Look around. Right. You spot your crossroads, and for this maneuver, one crossroad must be at right angles to the wind. Here you come to the crossroads, flying directly into the wind and in level flight over the road. Immediately after crossing the intersection, you go into a shallow turn in the upwind half of the circle. On going into the downwind half, you gradually steepen the bank, arriving at the steepest bank 3/4 of the way round the turn. As the turn is completed, the ship returns to straight and level over the intersection. We immediately bank to the opposite direction and repeat the procedure. This is an advanced state. That naturally calls for more precise wind drift analysis. You will notice that it is necessary to maintain an accurate ground pattern in order to arrive straight and level over the intersection. This can only be done by carefully judging your wind velocity and delicately shading your bank to compensate for the drift effect. Is that clear, gentlemen? Swell. Let's get along then to the toughest one, which is pylon aids. First of all, you've got to pick out a pylon. A pylon is a point you pick out in the ground. A tree, a water tank, anything. Let's take this tower and water tank. Remember, the points you select must have the same elevation and that a line joining the 2 points must be crosswind. Here we go, flying at 90 degrees to the wind on the downwind side of both pylons. As you pass the first pylon, dip your wing to identify it. Continue to the second pylon, turn into the wind and fly a semicircular pattern around this pylon, coordinating the turn smoothly and constantly varying the bank from medium to steep and back to medium at the point where you roll out. Now we're turning into the wind for another semicircular pattern around the first pylon. You complete this turn and roll out downwind in level flight. When you reach the starting point of the original turn, you've completed the pattern of a pylon 8. But wait a second. Before we go on, let's take a look at the pylon from your angle. Keep a constant line of sight down your wing to the pylon. As you fly that semicircular pattern, your wingtip should make this smooth semicircular pattern around the pylon, not on it, until you complete about 3/4 of a circle. Notice how you can check the correctness of your altitude by the smoothness of your pivot. If you're flying at the correct bank for your altitude, you will pivot on your pylon like this. But if you fly at too high an altitude with the same bank, it will cause a very bad pivot, like this. The pylon will appear to move out in front of the wing. Now, if you fly your pylon with the same bank, but at too low an altitude, your turn will not be tight enough and the pylon will appear to move out behind the wing, like this. But at the right altitude, the pylon seems to move directly over the center of your wing. When you've conquered all these eights, gentlemen, you know how to estimate altitude and drift and maneuver your plane safely and constantly at any altitude. You've learned how to plan ahead of you and to do the right thing by instinct. It's as simple as ABC. Either you learn to fly like Wilbur Wright, or you'll fall like Wilbur Wrong.